Sam Riley rode into Dusty Throat, where dust crunched under boots and hope died faster than flies in the sun. The sheriff, shaking like a leaf, faced off against Rusty Stone's gang, who looked bored enough to keel over from ennui. When a bullet tore through the air, Sam, to his own shock, dove to save the pathetic sheriff, though his cynical soul screamed, "Run, you fool!" Bleeding through his shirt, sarcasm still sharp, he realized this foolhardy act might cost him everything, or make him a legend. How did it come to this? The sun hammered Dusty Throat like it was dead set on burning out the last scraps of common sense in this godforsaken town. Sam Riley, slouched in his saddle, rode down the main street where horse dung and dust fought for the title of the day's worst stench. His eyes, squinted against the glare, scanned the crooked signs and sparse passers-by who looked like their whole existence was just waiting for bad news. Sam, a man whose tongue was sharper than any blade, was already mentally drafting a list of quips about this place. "If hell's real, it's renting out Dusty Throat," he muttered, spitting into the dirt. The town buzzed, not with life, but with tension, like a disturbed beehive. Sam caught the way folks kept glancing at the peeling building marked Sheriff. There, on the porch, stood a man with a star pinned to his chest, looking like he'd been dragged out of a whiskey barrel and forced to play hero. His name was Bill Hancock, and judging by how he fumbled with his revolver, he was more likely to bolt than shoot. Sam smirked, mentally betting $10 this guy wouldn't last a week. Across the street, near the saloon, a group loitered. Sam dubbed them Walking Trouble. This was Rusty Stone's gang, 5 men with faces like weathered leather and eyes that mixed arrogance with exhaustion. Their leader, Caleb Stone, known as Rusty, stood a step ahead, lazily chewing tobacco. His revolvers hung low, and his smirk hinted he'd already figured out how to gut this town. Sam, no stranger to such scenes, decided the smart move was to find whiskey, down a glass, and get out of Dusty Throat before sundown. But something in the air, maybe the whiff of gunpowder or the shadow of fear in folks' eyes, told him leaving clean wouldn't happen. Sam dismounted, tossed his reins over a post, and headed for the saloon, muttering, "If this town goes down, at least I'll get a drink first." His boots thumped the wooden boards, and in his head a clock was already ticking. How many minutes before this place went to hell? The Dusty Throat saloon reeked of whiskey, sweat, and disappointment, so thick it seemed baked into the wooden walls. Sam Riley pushed through the creaking doors, the floorboards groaning under his boots like they were fed up with life. The air inside was stifling despite the early hour, and the few patrons, a couple of farmers and a drunk slumped in the corner, stared at him like he'd brought the plague. Sam headed for the bar, where a balding bartender, with a face like an old frying pan, lazily wiped a glass. "Whiskey, don't water it down, I ain't a horse," Sam said, tossing a coin onto the counter. He'd barely taken a sip when the saloon doors swung open again, and Sheriff Bill Hancock stumbled in. His badge gleamed, but he looked like he might burst into tears. Hancock tried to stand tall, squaring his shoulders, but his trembling hands betrayed him. "Folks," he started, voice cracking, "Rusty Stone gave me 2 hours to clear out of town, or he'll burn everything to hell." The room went quiet, the kind of silence that spoke louder than words. Sam rolled his eyes, muttering, "Great plan, Sheriff. Maybe send him flowers, too," and... Before Hancock could respond, the doors slammed open again, and in walked Caleb Stone, known as Rusty. Tall, with sun-bleached hair and eyes that held more boredom than malice, he looked like a man tired of his own legend. His steps were slow, but each jingle of his spurs made folks shrink. "Hancock," Rusty drawled, spitting tobacco onto the floor. "You're still here? Thought you'd be packing your bags by now?" The sheriff opened his mouth, but no words came out, and Sam, to his own annoyance, felt his tongue take over. "If you're so set on a show, Stone," Sam said, not looking up from his glass, "at least let the sheriff miss his shot first. Otherwise, it's not a duel, it's a slaughter." The saloon went dead quiet, the kind of hush you could cut with a knife. Rusty turned slowly toward Sam, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. "And who are you, funny man? This clown's new deputy?" Sam shrugged, feeling every eye in the room on him. "Just drinking whiskey and waiting for this circus to end," he said, but an edge of steel crept into his voice, surprising even himself. Rusty studied him for a moment, like he was weighing whether Sam was worth a bullet. Then he snorted and turned back to Hancock. 2 hours, Sheriff. Don't make me say it again." He walked out, leaving behind the scent of tobacco and a threat that hung in the air like dust after a stampede. Sam downed his whiskey, irritation simmering inside. Why the hell had he opened his mouth? This town and its troubles weren't his fight. Main Street in Dusty Throat had turned into a stage where everyone waited for the curtain to fall, unsure if it'd be a comedy or a tragedy. Sam Riley leaned against a post outside the saloon, squinting into the sun that seemed hell-bent on roasting the town crisp. Across the way, by the sheriff's office, Bill Hancock was trying to scrape together what little courage he had, adjusting his hat and glancing around nervously. His movements were so clumsy, Sam mentally likened him to a newborn calf stumbling to its feet. "This guy'll die of fright before a bullet gets him," Sam muttered, rubbing his chin. Rusty Stone's gang lined up at the other end of the street, their shadows stretching like long claws ready to tear into the town. Caleb Stone, their leader, stood front and center, his revolvers catching the harsh light. His 5 men, hard-faced, scarred, and sneering, lounged behind him, hands resting on gun belts. Townsfolk peered from windows and doorways, their whispers carrying like a dry breeze. Sam, watching from his perch, felt the old urge to stay clear. He'd seen enough standoffs to know the score. Someone bled, someone died, and the vultures ate well. Hancock finally stepped forward, boots scuffing the dirt, his face pale as a ghost's. "Stone!" he called, voice thin but aiming for bold. "This town ain't yours to push around. Leave now, or we settle this the hard way." Rusty spat into the dust, his smirk sharp as a blade. "Hard way it is, Sheriff. Hope you're ready to eat dirt." The crowd tensed, and Sam's hand drifted to his own revolver, not out of loyalty, but instinct. He gave Hancock 5 minutes max before he was face down in the street. Then, Rusty's hand twitched, and his revolver cleared leather in a flash. The shot's crack split the air, and Sam saw the bullet's path like it was traced in the dust, straight for Hancock's chest. The sheriff froze, eyes wide, his own gun still half drawn. Sam's cynical side told him to look away. Let this play out like every other doomed standoff he'd seen, but something in Hancock's pathetic, wide-eyed stare, half fear, half foolish hope, twisted Sam's gut. This wasn't his fight, but the math didn't add up. One dead sheriff wouldn't fix this town, and Sam wasn't ready to watch another grave get dug just yet. Dust kicked up like a curtain before a bloody show as Rusty Stone's shot shattered the silence of Dusty Throat. Sam Riley, still by the post, felt his mind scream, "Don't do it, you idiot!" But his body, as if conspiring with some long-buried part of his soul, lunged forward. He shoved Sheriff Hancock aside, and the bullet meant for Bill's chest tore into Sam's shoulder, burning like hot iron. He dropped to one knee, clutching the wound as blood soaked his shirt. "Damn it," he rasped. "I knew this town was a graveyard." The street went still. Townsfolk, peeking from behind shutters, gaped like they'd seen a ghost. Rusty's gang, expecting an easy win, froze, their hands still on their revolvers, but fingers unmoving. Rusty himself, whose smirk rarely faltered, stared at Sam with something like confusion. Hancock sprawled in the dirt, coughed and gasped for air, his hat lying nearby like a symbol of his crushed pride. "Who the hell are you?" he managed, staring at Sam, who only grimaced, fighting the pain. "Guy who just ruined a perfectly good shirt," Sam snapped, hauling himself to his feet, though his shoulder screamed and his arm went numb. He glanced at Rusty, bracing for a second shot, but the man didn't move. Instead, Caleb Stone stepped forward, eyes narrowing as he sized Sam up like a rare poker card. "You could have walked away, funny man," Rusty said, his voice low, almost thoughtful. "Why'd you jump in?" Sam spat blood into the dust, his lips twisting into a smirk. "Beats me. Probably the lousy whiskey in the saloon." The gang stirred, one of them snorting, but Rusty raised a hand and they went quiet. He studied Sam for another second, then turned to his men. "We're done, for now," he said, and his crew, though clearly reluctant, started to back off. Townsfolk, still stunned, began creeping out from their hiding spots, whispering about the crazy drifter who'd just stopped a slaughter. Hancock, finally on his feet, looked at Sam with something like awe, but Sam waved him off with his good hand. "Don't thank me, Sheriff. I'm already regretting it." The pain in his shoulder throbbed, but Sam forced himself to stand tall and limped away, ignoring the stares and murmurs behind him. He knew this stunt hadn't solved anything. Rusty wasn't the type to just walk away, but in his chest, where sarcasm usually reigned, something else stirred, and it annoyed Sam more than the bullet in his shoulder. Night wrapped Dusty Throat in a black blanket that smelled of dust and gunpowder. Sam Riley, clutching his bleeding shoulder, staggered to an abandoned stable at the town's edge where the wind whistled through the cracks like a drunk harmonica player. He collapsed onto a pile of old hay, hissing in pain as he tore a strip from his already ruined shirt to bind the wound. "If I die because of that idiot sheriff," he muttered through gritted teeth, "I'll come back as a ghost and haunt him till his dying day." The blood still seeped, but Sam, no stranger to trouble, knew the bullet had passed clean through. Lucky, if you could call it that, he lay back, staring at the splintered roof where stars peeked through, trying to figure out what made him jump in front of that shot. His life was a string of saloons, shootouts, and quick exits, always guided by one rule: stay out of other people's messes. But that pitiful Hancock, with his foolish gaze like he still believed in justice, had cracked Sam's cynical armor. "Damn it," he breathed. "I'm either getting old or getting stupid." Meanwhile, the town buzzed with chaotic whispers. Folks, still digesting the day's events, clustered outside the saloon, trading tales about the stranger who stopped Rusty. Some swore he dodged the bullet like a devil. Others claimed he was drunk and just tripped at the right moment. Hancock, still pale, stood by his office, clutching his hat, muttering, "I owe him. Whoever he is, I'll find him." But Sam, hidden in the stable's shadows, wanted no thanks or fame, just peace and maybe a bottle of whiskey. Out in the night, beyond the town, Rusty's gang sat around a campfire. Caleb Stone stared into the flames, his face still but his mind racing. He'd seen plenty of death, but never someone risking their neck for a nobody like Hancock. "Who was that guy?" one of his men asked, but Rusty just shook his head. For the first time in years, his certainty in a world ruled by strength felt a crack. Sam, without knowing it, had left more than a bloody trail in Dusty Throat. He'd left a question that now gnawed at everyone. Morning broke over Dusty Throat with a rooster's hoarse crow that sounded like it didn't believe in the new day itself. The town, trembling with fear just yesterday, now hummed like a kicked beehive, but this time with curiosity. Folks gathered outside the saloon, the general store, and even a crumbling barn, whispering about the shot from yesterday and the stranger who, like something out of a bad play, saved Sheriff Hancock. Sam Riley, still holed up in the abandoned stable, caught snatches of their talk carried on the wind and winced like he'd tasted sour whiskey. "Now I'm a damn legend," he muttered, rewrapping his shoulder with a fresh rag. "Worse than that, only rain in the desert." The townsfolk, not knowing his name, had already dubbed him the Ghost of the Throat, chalking him up as either brave or crazy. An old woman selling apples swore she saw him vanish into the night like a shadow. The saloon's bartender claimed the stranger was drunk and didn't know what he was doing. But they all agreed on one thing. Nobody had ever seen someone risk their neck for Hancock, who half the town thought was a burden. The sheriff, standing on his office porch, looked a touch less pathetic than yesterday. He still clutched his hat, but now a spark of resolve glinted in his eyes. "I'll find that man," he told the crowd, "and thank him. He didn't just save me, he saved this whole town." Sam, hearing those words from afar, rolled his eyes so hard he nearly pulled a muscle. He didn't want thanks or hero songs. All he wanted was to get out of Dusty Throat before another bullet found him. But the wound in his shoulder, though not fatal, slowed him down, and his mind kept circling one question. Why had he jumped into that mess? He'd always seen himself as a survivor, not a savior. Yet yesterday, in that split second when he saw the fear in Hancock's eyes, something inside clicked, and it bugged him more than the pain in his shoulder. Meanwhile, the rumors about the Ghost of the Throat spread like weeds after a rain. Kids on the street were already playing stranger, running around with wooden pistols and yelling, "I saved the sheriff." Even the old drunk who always slept by the saloon mumbled something about a kind spirit of the desert. Sam, catching wind of this, spat into the hay and growled, "If I'm a spirit, I'm a damn angry one." But deep down, he felt this town, without even knowing it, was starting to change him, and that scared him more than Rusty Stone's gang ever could. The campfire crackled, casting shadows on the faces of the bandits gathered in a gulch outside Dusty Throat where the night smelled of smoke and tension. Caleb Stone, known as Rusty, sat on a rock staring into the flames like they held answers to questions he wasn't used to asking. His men, usually loud and cocky, sat quiet, glancing at each other like dogs sensing a storm. Yesterday's gunshots still rang in their ears, but not as loud as the stranger's act that had thrown their plans into chaos. Rusty, whose face was usually colder than a granite slab, looked like someone had poked at old wounds. Who the hell was that guy? One bandit, a wiry man called Blade, finally grumbled, jabbing a stick into the coals. "Some drifter jumping in front of a bullet for Hancock? Gotta be out of his damn mind." The others nodded, but Rusty didn't answer. His mind drifted back to a dusty road 20 years ago when he was a starving kid in a ditch. A half-dead preacher had given him his last bit of bread and water, asking nothing in return. That man died a week later, but his act stuck in Caleb's memory like a splinter he never pulled out. "Maybe he just wanted fame," suggested another bandit, a big man with a beard like a broom. Rusty shook his head, eyes still on the fire. "Fame!" He bolted the second it was over. "This ain't about fame." His voice was low, heavy as lead. He remembered the stranger's look, not heroic, not crazy, but tired like he didn't even know why he'd done it. That look was a mirror, and Rusty didn't like what he saw in it. His men waited for orders, but Rusty stayed silent. For the first time in years, he didn't know what to do. His world, where strength ruled everything, had cracked. He was used to people either cowering or dying, but this stranger did neither. He just stepped in front of a bullet for a worthless sheriff and walked away, leaving Rusty with a feeling he couldn't name. "Tomorrow we go back," he said at last, standing. "Not to fight. I want to know who he is." His men exchanged looks, but didn't argue. The echo of that gunshot still lingered, and it was changing not just the town, but a man who thought he was untouchable. Dawn over Dusty Throat hit like a slap, and Caleb Stone, known as Rusty, felt it on his skin like a challenge. He stood before his gang in the gulch, boots sinking into dry earth, his usually cold eyes burning with a strange fire. His men, 5 hardened outlaws used to robbery and blood, stared at him like he'd started speaking Latin. Rusty, whose name made towns tremble, had just said the unthinkable. "We're turning ourselves in. We go to town today. No guns." His words hung in the air like smoke from last night's fire. Blade, the wiry bandit with a twitchy gaze, broke the silence first. "Turn ourselves in? You hit your head, Rusty? All 'cause of some drifter?" His voice shook with anger, and the others nodded, fists clenching. Rusty raised a hand and they fell quiet, but the tension lingered like a taut string. "It's not about the drifter," he said, his voice steady but laced with a hint of doubt. "I've seen men die for money, power, revenge. But this guy, he risked his life for Hancock, who ain't worth half a bullet. I need to know why." He turned, staring at the horizon where Dusty Throat barely showed through the morning haze. His mind flashed back to that preacher from his childhood, the one who gave him food, and now the stranger's act of saving the sheriff struck the same old splinter. Rusty wasn't sentimental. Years of banditry had burned that out of him. But this act was a crack in stone, letting water seep through. He told his gang about that day he was saved, how he swore never to be weak. "But maybe," he said, almost a whisper, "strength ain't about taking. Maybe it's about giving." His men erupted in outrage. The big one, called Thunder, roared, "You want us to throw it all away? For what? Some sheriff who can't even shoot?" Others joined in, their voices blending into a growl, but Rusty stood like a rock. He knew not all would follow. Blade was already eyeing him like a traitor, but his authority still held them in check. "Anyone who don't like it can leave," he said, meeting each man's gaze. "But I'm going to town, no guns. Who's with me?" After a long pause, 3 nodded, while Blade and another backed off, muttering curses. Rusty turned toward the trail to Dusty Throat, and for the first time in years, his heart beat with something other than adrenaline. The sun had barely cleared the horizon, but Dusty Throat was already choking on heat and unease, like the town knew today wouldn't be ordinary. The streets, usually empty this early, stirred when someone shouted, "Rusty's gang is coming!" Townsfolk, used to hiding at the mere mention of Stone, rushed to windows, clutching anything that could pass for a weapon, from pitchforks to rusty rifles. Sam Riley, still holed up in the abandoned stable, heard the buzz of voices and cursed, rubbing his aching shoulder. "Just what I needed," he muttered, peering through a crack in the wall. At the far end of Main Street, shadows appeared. Rusty Stone walked ahead, his steps slow but steady, followed by 3 of his men, minus the usual jingle of spurs or glint of revolvers. Their hands were empty, as strange a sight as rain in the desert. The townsfolk froze, unable to believe their eyes. Sheriff Hancock, standing on his office porch, gripped his revolver, his face pale but holding firm. "What in the hell?" he muttered, watching Rusty stop in the middle of the street and raise his hands to show no weapons. "Hancock," Rusty called, his voice carrying over the dusty street. "I'm not here to fight. We're turning ourselves in." The crowd gasped. Someone dropped a pitchfork, and the clank of metal on dirt was the only reply in the sudden silence. Hancock, his eyes darting from Rusty to his men, stepped forward, still holding his gun ready. "You serious, Stone? This some kind of trick?" Rusty shook his head, his face tired but calm. "No tricks. I saw a man risk his life for you yesterday. Got me thinking. We're done running. Done." The townsfolk started whispering, their fear giving way to disbelief, then a flicker of hope. Hancock, still skeptical, slowly lowered his revolver, though his voice shook. "If you mean it, Stone, you'll drop your weapons and go under arrest. No funny business." Rusty nodded, and his men, though clearly reluctant, tossed their knives and ammo belts into the dust. Sam, watching from the stable, felt his jaw drop. "Hell's bells," he muttered. "I saved the sheriff, and now I've reformed the damn bandits. This is too much." But deep down, he knew this unarmed march was more than a surrender. It was a break from the past, sparked by his reckless dive in front of a bullet. The noon sun scorched Dusty Throat, turning Main Street into a sizzling skillet where every step kicked up puffs of dust. Sheriff Hancock stood in the center, his revolver now holstered, but his fingers still twitched like they didn't trust the peace. Across from him, Caleb Stone, Rusty, kept his hands raised, his face steady, but his eyes betraying an inner storm. Behind him, his 3 men, unarmed and sullen, looked like they'd been forced to swallow a handful of sand. The townsfolk, clustered along the street's edges, stayed silent, their gazes darting between the sheriff and the bandits like flies unsure where to land. Hancock, still braced for a trick, stepped forward. "You know what this means, Stone." His voice was rough but firm. "You're going to jail, all of you." Rusty nodded, his lips twitching in a faint smile that looked more like a grimace. "I know, Sheriff. I'm tired of killing, tired of watching others die. That stranger, he showed me there's another way." Hancock frowned, trying to process the bandit's words. "The stranger? You mean the one who saved me yesterday? This is because of him?" Rusty just shrugged like he didn't fully understand it himself. The crowd started murmuring, and the words, "Ghost of the Throat," swept through the street like a breeze. Someone said the stranger was an angel sent to save the town. Another argued he was just a crazy drifter. But everyone felt this moment, the surrender of a gang that had terrorized the region for years, was more than just the end of a fight. Hancock finally waved to his deputies, 2 scared boys who barely knew how to hold a rifle. "Cuff 'em, no funny business," he ordered, and they stumbled forward, slapping handcuffs on Rusty and his men. Sam, still watching from the stable's shadows, felt his throat tighten. He saw Rusty bow his head, letting the cuffs go on, and the townsfolk start to disperse, their faces glowing with a mix of relief and disbelief. "I saved one fool," Sam muttered, rubbing his aching shoulder, "and now the whole town thinks I'm a saint. That's worse than a bullet." But deep down, he knew his act, however foolish, was a stone tossed into a pond, and its ripples had changed everything. For the first time in years, Dusty Throat breathed free, and Sam, though he hated to admit it, knew he was part of that change. Dusty Throat settled into a hush by evening, like the town had exhaled after a long day of shock and hope. Sam Riley sat in the abandoned stable, leaning against a wall where cobwebs clung to his hat like an old friend. His shoulder still ached, but the wound was starting to close, slow as a stubborn mule. Outside, he heard townsfolk talking about Rusty Stone's surrender, their voices mixing with the shuffle of feet and occasional shouts of joy. Sam grimaced, sipping water from a canteen he'd found in the corner. "All this circus over one dumb leap," he muttered. "I saved the sheriff, and now they think I'm the Messiah." He peered through a gap in the boards, watching Hancock, still clutching his hat, bark orders to his deputies as they led Rusty and his men to the old jail. The townsfolk, like they'd woken from a long sleep, gathered outside the saloon, swapping tales about the ghost of the throat. One swore he saw the stranger vanish into the night, another claimed he was a hired gun, a third insisted he was just a drunk fool. Sam snorted, feeling his old sarcasm creep back, but now it was laced with something new, a faint shadow of satisfaction that annoyed him more than the pain in his shoulder. He thought back to how it started, the dusty street, Rusty's shot, Hancock frozen like a rabbit before a snake. Sam had acted without thinking, his body outpacing his brain, and now he couldn't figure out why he hadn't let the sheriff die. He'd always lived by every man for himself, but in that moment, something inside broke, like a rusty lock under a hammer's blow. He didn't want to be a hero. Heroes die first. But watching the town come alive, seeing folks walk the streets without fear for the first time in years, he felt an odd warmth in his chest. "Damn it," he muttered. "If this is conscience, it's worse than a fever." Sam gathered his things, a battered bag, his revolver, and some jerky he'd found in the stable. He decided to leave before dawn, before the town started hunting for its ghost. He wanted no handshakes or thanks. The legend was better than the truth. Taking one last look at Dusty Throat, where lanterns were starting to glow, he muttered, "If this is victory, it's damn bitter." But as he stepped into the night, he knew he'd done what he had to, and that was the only thing keeping him from his usual mockery of himself. Years swept by like dust driven across the desert, and Dusty Throat had transformed as if someone had breathed new life into it. Streets, once mired in dirt and fear, now hummed with merchants' wagons and the laughter of kids running near a new schoolhouse. The saloon still stood, but now it served coffee as good as its whiskey, and the old sheriff's office had become a town hall where Bill Hancock, now mayor, signed papers with an air of importance. Rusty Stone's former bandits, those who didn't run, worked on farms or in shops, their once grim faces now lit with weary honesty. The legend of the ghost of the throat, though, never faded. It grew, gathering details like moss on an old oak. Sam Riley, now gray-haired with wrinkles carved by sun and time, sat in a saloon in another town, 100 miles from Dusty Throat. His shoulder, where a bullet once lodged, still ached on rainy days, a reminder of the day he became a hero against his will. He sipped whiskey, listening as the bartender spun a tale about the stranger who saved a whole town with one leap. Sam snorted, his lips twitching into a crooked smile. "Sounds like a story for fools," he muttered, but his usual bite was missing. He thought back to that day, the dust, the gunshot, Hancock frozen before death. Back then, Sam thought his act was just a moment's weakness, a stupid move he'd regret, but the years showed him otherwise. Dusty Throat, a town he planned to ditch after one drink, had become something more. Proof that one reckless act could change everything. He never went back, never sought fame, but whispers of the ghost reached him like an echo, stirring something he couldn't name. Sam finished his whiskey and stood, tossing a coin on the counter. He stepped outside, where the stars shone as they had the night he left Dusty Throat. "If this is a legacy," he muttered, looking at the sky, "it ain't half bad." He walked into the dark, his boots thumping the ground, and in his chest, where sarcasm once ruled, there was now a flicker of peace.